So am I hearing from you now that what matters here is not the term genocide, it's just that there is a security problem in Nigeria? Is that what I'm
No,
hearing from you
it's
right now?
genocide. I don't care if you call it Fred. I mean, it is, you have people that are being driven by their radical faith, their radical Islam, that are killing hundreds of thousands of people and displacing millions in the name of Allahu Akbar. That's what's happening there. And I don't know how else. I mean, this shouldn't be, oh, I'm a Christian, so I'm against this, or I'm a human being, so I'm against this. This is the only decent thing to do, is to stop this. I don't know why the terminology is so important, but it is an intentional effort to wipe out a people group. And that is by definition genocide.
Hello, you're welcome back to the Beyond Africa podcast with me, your host, Ngalim Bernard. At the Beyond Africa podcast, we share African stories that change lives. President Trump recently designated Nigeria as a country of particular concern. His Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, has started sanctioning officials of the Nigerian government. At the bottom of these American actions are what President Trump calls Christian genocide. Over the next 1 hour and more, we'll discuss how these developments are reshaping Nigeria's security landscape and why Americans are interested in Nigeria. We'll also reflect on what Nigerians at home and in the diaspora, as well as policymakers, should consider moving forward. Our guest today is Mike Arnold, an American missionary, an entrepreneur, and a former mayor of Blanco City in Texas, USA. With over 15 years of deep involvement in Nigeria, spanning more than 15 visits, including 6 investigative missions since 2019, he has become a familiar advocate for the plight of internally displaced persons, particularly those fleeing violence from groups like Boko Haram in the North and the Middle East. He's our guest today, and he recently was around Washington, D.C., where he was a keynote speaker at an event that brought Nigerians together to shine the light on what is happening in Nigeria. So, as usual, thank you so much for watching us. Thank you also for commenting, liking, and leaving comments. We love the comments because they give us your thoughts and compare our thoughts to your thoughts, making us think critically about what we give to you. Mike, you are welcome to the Beyond Africa podcast.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me. I saw you in Washington, D.C. earlier this week, and are you back home already?
Just got home yesterday. Yes, sir.
So what took you to Washington, D.C.? I saw you there in the presence of Nigerians.
I was invited to be the keynote speaker at a rally on Monday to stop the genocide rally, and stayed there for a couple days doing meetings with the State Department and various congressmen.
So you agree with President Trump's characterization that what is happening in Nigeria is a genocide? Is that what you're telling me?
Oh, well, absolutely. There's no denying it. If you actually seek truth and look at what's really happening, it's not just that it's happening now. It's been happening for a very long time. In fact, Nigeria itself is the nation as we know it is founded on genocide. It's always been under the surface, but it flares up whenever the northern power base feels threatened. The genocide pops up again.
Though President Trump called this genocide, and you agreeing with him, scholars and other news media and other organizations have said this is not a genocide. They recognize that there is a security problem in Nigeria that does not amount to a genocide because there is no intention to erase or exterminate a particular race of people, a particular class of people.
Well, do you trust anything that comes out of most African politicians' mouths? Let me walk you through just a little bit of the history so you can understand where this comes from and also why people would be denying it. Nigeria, in its very DNA, is genocide. First, establishing the fact that radical Islam has its very ideology is one of jihad and genocide, which means an intentional effort to wipe out a people group. And the stated goal and the actions of the organized radical Islamic movement is to make everybody in the world think and act like they do, and using any means necessary. And it is as you can see throughout history, it's a ideology of mass murder. It's an ideology of genocide. In 1804, in the northern, what's now northern Nigeria, a caliphate was formed, the Sokoto Caliphate. And it became fairly quickly, by some measures, the largest pre-colonial empire in all of Africa. And it was done through jihad. It was done through the extermination of anybody who would not accept and embrace their way of thinking. So it was the caliphate was established by jihad genocide. That was still in existence 100 years later when the British came in. They set up what we now know as Nigeria as actually two separate extraction corporations, never really a colony, but more of an extraction point. And they co-opted the northern power base. They co-opted the caliphate through their policy of indirect rule, where they would rather work with a totalitarian that obeys them than try to manage an unruly mass of people. So they wrapped themselves around the caliphate. And that was still in place when they left in maybe your lifetime. I know people who were, in 1960, you're not that old. In 1960, though, when they set up what they call Nigeria, they lumped together two disparate people groups, the Sharia law North with the Christian, forward-thinking, modern South, and they engineered the structure to maintain that indirect rule. They set up the structure so the North would have control over this nation and its mineral resources. At the time, the main source of mineral resources is the oil in the South. So instead of dealing with the Southern people who are entrepreneurial and independent-minded, they're friends. They embrace their faith. They embrace the language. They embrace the British education, but they set it up so the North would have control. It went back and forth for a number of years as they jockeyed for position, but ultimately the North embarked on a genocide, again, of the South, and the South split off. What we now call, or what they called Biafra, tried to establish an independent nation. The British had a choice to make. The British chose the North once again. Not the people who spoke their language, not the people who embraced their faith, not the people who helped them run their empire. They chose the people in the North who had totalitarian control. And the British intentionally ran a blockade that starved to death millions of Nigerian, mostly children, between 1967 and 1970. Literally, and this is documented. This is not conspiracy. The British themselves said it was just a tactic to get them to the table faster. But the British presided over a genocide to kill the Southerners and ensure Northern control. And that's what happened, and that's how it's set up. The Constitution of Nigeria is written to ensure Northern control. Their villa, which is like we would call the White House here, was built with 2 mosques and no chapel. It is a Northern-dominated government, and the North is built on jihad and genocide. That is the power
All right.
of Nigeria. That's the power of Nigeria. That's the reality of it.
Yeah, thank you. You've made some very strong assertions there, and I want to touch on just one or two. The first one is the way the British organized the North and the South during the colonial rule. What I know is that the British used the indirect rule everywhere they had colonies, the same as in Cameroon, where they would let the local people manage the things or their business the way they would want to, but the British are only there supervising from the top. Are you saying that the British intentionally made this for the north of Nigeria to be separate or different than it did for the rest of its colonies in Africa? Because we don't see this in other parts of.
Well, if you look at other things, it was in the same time period as at the end of World War I. If you've ever seen the movie Lawrence of Arabia, or you know the story there, where after World War I, when the British and the Europeans conquered that area, at the end of the movie, Lawrence is waving his arms at the Yalta Conference saying, "Don't draw the map this way. Don't put these people groups together because they're always going to fight each other. They're always going to fail." But that's been their intention. It was in 1914 when the administrator over these 2 different corporations, the North and the South, decided to merge them together for administrative efficiency. His wife, Lady Lugard, came up with the name Nigeria for this amalgamation. And they structured the amalgamation so that their indirect rule would the South has always been unruly. They're entrepreneurial. They're free-spirited. They're also very economically minded. At the time of their independence, they were the fastest growing economic region on earth for 10 years running in South Nigeria. But the British favored the North. And again, at the independence and then the Biafran War, they backed the North because they wanted control of the resources in the South, the oil, but they didn't want to deal with the Southerners. They nationalized the resources under this amalgamated Nigeria and gave control of that amalgamated Nigeria to the North. That's in their documents. That's the way the Constitution's written. That's historical fact.
I do understand, but what I'm saying is the British rule intentionally targeted to favor the Northerners, or the circumstances as at now have shaped Nigeria into that direction? I say so because during the Biafran War of Independence, for example, the Western Nigeria, the Yorubas, they were not also in favor of the Biafran independence movement. So why would you put all the responsibility on the North and on Nigeria for preventing the separation of Biafra?
It was the North that drove that. The Yoruba are amazing people, industrious people, but they've never, from what I've seen, had the impetus to have control. They haven't sought the control. It's the North that seeks totalitarian control. The North that demands it, requires it. There's 12 states currently under Sharia law, all under the Sultan of Sokoto. The same entity that was founded in 1804 is still there today, and still the power base. And that it was specifically the Caliphate that the British worked with. I'm not issuing my opinion. I'm just saying you can look historically. That's who the British worked with, because they were, for indirect rule, you want to work with the most powerful indirect rulers, and that was the North. And they had
which was similar to the South, because in the South they also worked with the already existing rulers, right? The already existing kingdoms and officials in the South. It wasn't different. They did not overthrow some rulers in the South because they wanted.
It's a very different thing. The South is and it's still an entrepreneurial, independent, unruly people, and they don't have the same totalitarian power structure that they have in the North. The North, if the Sultan says bow, they bow. He is the king and the Pope today for 108 million Muslims in West Africa, not just in Nigeria, but in the greater area. If you're a British person and you want to control as many people possible by talking to one man, you talk to the Sultan. And that's who they chose. That's who they worked with. He is in charge of that area, the final say, both through faith and through the Sharia courts. He's the final say. And so, that was the most efficient rule was through him. The South doesn't have totalitarian rulers like that, and they never have.
So are you agreeing that the principle was the same, but its oppression was different in the South because the South did not have a strong leader that commanded authority over everyone within his jurisdiction?
Correct. Yeah. Again, I don't think they didn't pick the North because of the ideology of the North. They picked it for the efficiency. It just cold calculating efficiency to work with the strongest totalitarian ruler. Also, the South, being entrepreneurial and industrious, has more of a look at it in the bigger picture. Great Britain would rather import oil than import finished products. They don't want to see an industrialized nation rise up because they can't control it. It's all set up for their extraction. They want to extract the raw materials, and the North doesn't have as much of it. Their ideology and their economy and their way of life is not as industrious as the South. And so if they're going to choose one, they're going to choose the regime that doesn't care so much about the resources, because they're going to be more likely to sell it to them.
All right, let's move on. Let's talk about the next item you highlighted in your introduction, and that was about the radical Islam and genocide. You said the north of Nigeria, or Nigeria, has always been based on genocide. Can you explain that a little bit, because it doesn't clarify, it doesn't get across clearly for a listener to understand how a country that was set up by the British suddenly becomes based, or is suddenly claimed to have been based on radical Islam.
Well, it's not sudden. Again, the power structure there has never been one of civil authority. It's always been one of Muslim authority. It's always been faith-based there. And that faith has always been in the north, radical Islam. So going back to the origin of it, the Fulani, who are a nomadic tribe, are not from Nigeria. They're from the Sahara. And they came in hundreds of years earlier, carrying with them radical Islam. And that's always been their ideology, that's always been their faith, and that's always been their form of government. It's Sharia government. It's not civil government as we know it and as we would define it. It's always been a faith-based totalitarian thing. And it, again, was in 1804 that Usman Dan Fodio, 19 generations back, his 19th generation descendant, sits on the throne. Is the current Sultan of Sokoto. But the Sokoto Caliphate was established and relatively rapidly became, again, by some measures, the largest pre-colonial empire in Africa through Jihad. They would do exactly what they're doing now. They would go into villages and say, either join us or die. The methodology, and this plays out today, and this is well documented, when these radical groups will do a roadblock, for example, or go into a village. Oftentimes they'll separate the residents, men from women, Christians from Muslims. They kill the Christian men, no questions asked. They go to the Muslim men and say, join us or die. And if they say, okay, we'll join you, then there's many reports, in some instances, they'll have them pull down their pants to see if they're circumcised. And if they are, they'll shoot them. And if they aren't, they'll question them on the Quran. If they can't answer it, they'll kill them. And then they sell the woman into sex slavery. So that's always been their methodology. Radicalism, I'm saying radical Islam on purpose to differentiate it from the Muslim faith in general. But the Caliphate, the Sokoto Caliphate, has been built since the Fulani came in from the Sahara. It's always been built on radical Islam, and that's never changed. That's how the Caliphate was built.
Yeah, so under the present circumstances, how do you separate the radical Islam from normal Islam in Nigeria?
So let me tell you, one of the things that I do presently, I build and I run schools in camps for internally displaced Nigerians. We currently have 3 schools set up, about 600 full-time students. We're building a 4th now. And one of our schools is in a camp that's filled with displaced Muslims. They are victims too. Like I said, they'll kill the Christians, but then they'll go to the Muslims and say, join us or die. And there are those that choose to die rather than become radicalized. Those people have integrity. They deserve to be honored. They deserve to be recognized and celebrated. And so this is not just a Christian genocide. It's the genocide of anybody that stands in their way. What I'm finding is, though, and I don't know why, but I haven't heard many, if any, voices in Nigeria of the moderate Muslims standing up to this. I don't know why they keep quiet. Maybe it's fear, but there are certainly those Muslims.
But do you happen to know any? Yeah, do you happen to know any moderate Muslims in Nigeria that you speak to off record?
I've corresponded with some that claim to be, and actually on our staff at our schools, we have at least one Muslim person that works in our schools serving these children very faithfully and passionately. I have known moderate Muslims. I don't know what the percentage is, but again, for some reason, they tend to keep very quiet. They don't call attention to themselves, and I probably understand why, because they probably live in fear.
If it's so difficult to identify moderate Muslims, it's one of 2 things. Either they don't exist, or you are just trying to be polite by saying that all Muslims in Nigeria are not radical Islamists.
Again, I don't know how you would identify them, other than the fact that I know.
Then if you don't know how to identify them, how do you come to the conclusion that there are radical Islamists and moderate Muslims?
The methodology, there are those that the radicals kill because they are not radical. They refuse to be radicalized. There are Muslims that refuse to be radicalized that would rather die. And that happens frequently in Nigeria. Experience and there's not a census of displaced, but it's about 80-20. It's about 20% of displaced Nigerians who are Muslim, and they're victims of the radicals. So again, I don't know how you would differentiate them on any kind of person by person basis, but there are those who refuse to be radicalized and would rather die than become radicalized. I would consider those to be moderate Muslims.
So what you're telling me is, if I go to any place in Nigeria now, especially in the north, and I see a Muslim there, that Muslim is a radical Muslim, because that is where these jihadists are, and they are forcing everyone there to radicalize or die.
Certainly, and there's territories like that for sure. And it's either that or they keep their mouth shut and they go along with it. They don't they don't speak up and they don't speak against their radical brethren. You don't see that happen very often, if at all.
All right, let's talk about the genocide. Until Donald Trump came to the scene and called this a genocide, I did not hear anyone calling it a genocide. Are you one of those who influenced Trump's rhetoric?
And I'm credited with prompting his actions, in fact, indirectly. But look, there's been a lot of people that have been saying this for a long time. If you haven't heard it, it's because the world has been drowning it out. But there have been a number of organizations and people that have for years been trying to get the world's attention to what's happening there. And certainly Nigerians know. There's certainly plenty of displaced millions and up to 12 million all over the country that are eyewitnesses to the genocide. Make a long story short, on October 14th, I was brought to Nigeria by the president of Nigeria, Tinubu's spin doctor, his international PR guy, and the national security advisor of Nigeria, Nuhu Ribadu, invited me to do a PR stooge, like a North Korea style, Soviet style PR event. And they took me there and ran me through some phony talking points, photo ops, and had a press conference and expected me to stand up and deny the genocide. And instead, I risked my life at the press conference to tell the truth. And within 72 hours, there were more than 3 billion global impressions. And the narrative flipped globally within 72 hours from 80% genocide denial to 70% affirmation. That was on October 14th. It was 2 weeks later that Trump took action. And every observer on both sides of the Atlantic says it was 100% directly related to what I did in Abuja on October 14th.
Yeah, so of what interest is Nigeria to you? Why do you spend all this time going to Nigeria, working with with internally displaced people, and of course, trying to make the United States adopt a policy that considers Nigeria to be suffering a genocide?
I've been to Nigeria 16 times since 2010 as a missionary. I have never brought home anything of value other than treasures in heaven. And it's been sacrificial work. I have felt called by God to do that. I mean, that's the short answer. This is my calling. God has called me there. I have such high esteem for Nigerians. In fact, when I look around at the United States, the character that at one point made us the greatest nation on earth is hard to find here oftentimes. I see it more abundantly there. The integrity, the honor, the faith, the values, the industry of most Nigerians it impresses me. And I beg them many times to send missionaries to us in America. They have so much to offer. And so I feel a kinship with them. Oftentimes I feel more at home there than I do here because of this reason. Because their values are great values. They're godly values. And so I consider it my second home. And some of my dearest friends and brothers and sisters on the planet are Nigerians. And that's what keeps me going back. In 2019, I was there on a speaking tour when I took an unexpected detour into a camp for displaced Nigerians in the middle of Abuja, middle of their capital. Literally just randomly stumbled into this camp. And it was the most horrific thing I ever saw. The living conditions are unimaginable. Sewage ditches and hand-built shanties, mostly women and children living with nothing. And hearing their stories of surviving genocide, surviving massacre. Everybody they loved killed. Everything they had burned and driven out. And they ended up here. And they'd been there at that time, been there for 5 years with no help. And I promised to tell their story and to see if I could help. And that's been my soul driving calling ever since is to tell that story, to raise awareness and try to get help for these people that are living in the worst conditions imaginable through no fault of their own. So it's a calling.
So you go to Nigeria on a book tour, and while in Nigeria, you make an unexpected detour into an IDP camp, and that completely changes your mind about Nigeria, and you start advocating for Christians in Nigeria. And one of your advocacies has resulted in the United States adopting a policy that that Nigeria or Christians in Nigeria are suffering from Christian persecution and even Christian genocide. But when we read reports and from the news, international organizations, scholars, we see that the violence in Nigeria attacks or hurts all classes of people, Christians, Muslim, animists, because we even have the herders, the Fulani herders, that are sometimes accused as those who are attacking agriculturalists in the middle belt of Nigeria.
That's absolute spin, and it's a falsehood. The farmer herder clash. There's been farmers and there's been nomadic herders for hundreds of years there. And sure, the herd of cattle might come through and trample somebody's cassava, but what we're seeing now is the Fulani, again, being the radicalized Muslims that came in from the Sahara in the original, hundreds of years ago, and that are the basis of the Caliphate. But when they come in the middle of the night on motorcycles with AK-47s and wipe out an entire village, that's not a farmer-herder clash. It's always the farmers that all get killed and their homes burned and their churches and schools burned, and the herders ride off on motorcycles. That's not a farmer-herder clash. That's a lie. That is spin. It is targeted. Other sources will tell you, credible sources, Nigeria is the number one nation on earth for Christian genocide. By a factor of 10, more Christians are killed there times 10 than anywhere else on earth. That's the reality. But again, it's not. If this were happening in India, it would be a Hindu genocide. It's not that specifically singling out Christians. It's singling out anybody who doesn't subscribe to their ideology, and Christians are the number one target of that in Nigeria.
Yeah, you just mentioned that the sources of the summary of what are made from the sources is a spin, but you go ahead to say that other credible sources have a contrary view to what the spin doctors are circulating on the media. Which are these other credible sources you're talking about?
Gosh, you can look at there's Persecution Watch. There's Open Doors. There's quite a few. I can send them to you. I don't, off the top of my head, the names. Genocide Watch is one of them. It's an international, well-established organization. Other groups like that, human rights organizations that have studied.
Yeah, but when I look at reports from other human rights organizations like International Crisis Group, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, they recognize there is a security problem, but this security problem does not amount to a genocide, because for different reasons, they say everyone is involved in the effects, or everyone is affected by the attacks.
But let's put it this way. And we talk about the Jewish Holocaust in Nazi Germany, right? We don't talk about the Gypsy Holocaust, but we could, because they were all rounded up and killed also. There were homosexual Holocaust in Germany. There was political dissident Holocaust in Germany. They're lesser groups, but no one denies there was a Holocaust. What does it matter if, yes, Christians are being targeted, they are being killed wholesale, at well over 100,000 in the last 15 years. There are other groups too. They're not speaking up. They're not the ones driving this. For some reason, they're being silent. Again, we don't call it a Gypsy Holocaust in Germany, but it certainly was. It doesn't diminish the fact that, it makes it worse. There's even more people being killed. We should all stand together to fight against it. It's a non-radical Muslim genocide. How about we call it that? It's a genocide. It's an intentional effort to wipe out a people group, and that people group is anybody that doesn't subscribe to radical Islam. That is a genocide, and the bulk of it is Christian.
Absolutely, but the Global Terrorism Index of 2024 attributes most deaths between 2022 and 23 to banditry and not to the jihadist groups.
What is it? A bandit? So this is Robin Hood riding around stealing people's money? No, that's not true. These are radical Muslims that come in with AK-47s at night screaming Allahu Akbar as they kill people and hack off their heads and burn their churches and schools. That's not a bandit. That's a terrorist. That's a euphemism. The better term for the bandits is the Fulani militia. And a lot of these groups, it's global warming. They don't go in there yelling, I am warm. They go in there yelling, Allahu Akbar.
Okay, before we talk about the Allahu Akbar, let's look at the groups that have been identified to operate out there. We have the Boko Haram, we have the ISWAP, then we have the Fulani herdsmen. How do you identify the radicalists amongst them? I'm forgetting the bandits. How do you identify the different segments or the different classes of these groups when they operate there? Do all of them say the Allahu Kubaru?
Every victim, every survivor that I've ever talked to, and every report I've ever heard of any of these, and it's ongoing, of villages, of people being wiped out, they all have the same faith. They're all being driven by radical Islam. Of that, there is no question, there is no doubt, there is no debate. They're driven by radical Islam. How they self-organize and self-identify, you have a lot that have come in from other nations. I mean, millions that have come in from North Africa and elsewhere to join the Jihad there. A lot of those are under ISWAP. There's also Al-Qaeda affiliates and other factions that are there, Boko Haram being one. The native is primarily centered on the Fulani radical militia. But all of the common denominator of all of them is radical Islam and the ideology of jihad. And again, of that, there's no debate. There is no debate. Again, what they call themselves, who cares? You have people driven by radical Islam killing everybody that's not. And it must be stopped.
So am I hearing from you now that what matters here is not the term genocide, it's just that there is a security problem in Nigeria? Is that what I'm hearing from you right
genocide. You know, I don't care if you call it Fred. I mean, it is, you have people that are being driven by their radical faith, their radical Islam, that are killing hundreds of thousands of people and displacing millions in the name of Allahu Akbar. That's what's happening there. And I don't know how else. I mean, this shouldn't be, oh, I'm a Christian, so I'm against this, or I'm a human being, so I'm against this. This is the only decent thing to do, is to stop this. I don't know why the terminology is so important, but it is an intentional effort to wipe out a people group. And that is, by definition, genocide. What else is genocide? By legal definition and precedent, is the intentional denial of aid to displaced people. That is genocide by legal definition. And this administration there stands guilty of genocide by legal definition for their intentional denial of aid to the IDPs. That's legal.
It appears to me that the International Criminal Court did some preliminary examination of the facts and the events that happened in Nigeria between 2010 and 2020 and did not classify these events as a genocide. So why should your interpretation of a legal issue completely be divorced from the interpretation of the International Criminal Court?
It's like the United Nations. Who's behind it? Who drives it? There's quite a bit of evidence that the ICC is oftentimes quite skewed to turn a blind eye to the actions of radical Islam. Like the United Nations, I can take you today to IDP camps filled with displaced Nigerians that have been there, some of them for a decade, that the United Nations denies they exist. I can show you a report produced by the UNHCR, United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, in 2015, and mapping out and detailing multiple camps in Abuja, where we have schools today. And today they say those camps don't exist. They haven't changed. They're still there. The same people are still there, but it's being covered up by the United Nations, by the Nigerian government, and in the past administration by the United States government. I don't speak from what I read in the headlines. I don't speak by what I see in the reports. I speak from 16 trips with boots on the ground to the front lines of this genocide. I am more of an authority than any document you've read. I'm an eyewitness.
You are an eyewitness. An eyewitness of the IDPs. You are an eyewitness of the IDPs and not an eyewitness of the event that happened at the time that produced the IDPs. Because if we want to talk about what you have seen, you have only heard what the IDPs are telling you, isn't it?
I was in Boko not long after the Christmas massacre. I was on the campus of Plateau State University and stood on the ground where students were killed just a few days before. And I sent a team last year. I couldn't go because of my skin color, back to Gwoza, which is right on the Cameroon border in Borno State. Displaced people from there, sent them back there with my team, with cameras, to document exactly what's on the ground there. I've gone as far as any white man can go and survive. And I know these people very well. I have documentary evidence. Unless you accuse a little old lady that has a bullet scar from perpetrating a hoax, she's going to be a pretty credible source. And when you have dozens of people all telling the exact same story of what happened in the community, independent of each other, all from their own perspectives, there is no denying that. Nobody that wrote any of the reports you're quoting has set foot on the ground more than I have. I guarantee you that. And they haven't talked to more people than I have. I can guarantee you that too. And I got video documentary proof of it all.
There's available information on the internet about your visits to Nigeria. That one is undeniable. But with those terrorist organizations, they usually claim responsibility for actions whenever they happen. Has Boko Haram actually been claiming these actions and endorsing whenever the Fulani herdsmen attack someone? Because if we want to draw a line between Fulani herdsmen committing their crimes and fighting for land and Boko Haram committing terrorist attacks, those should be two different things.
The Fulani herdsmen they're not herdsmen. Just because their tribe is traditionally a herding tribe doesn't mean that a young man on a motorcycle with an AK-47 is a herdsman. That's ridiculous. They're not. Okay, there's a lot that are doing this that have never herded a cow in their life. They ride around on motorcycles with AK-47s, killing people and raping people and burning things and abducting people and selling them into slavery. That is not a herdsman, and that is not a secret. And you go into these areas. If this was about land, then they would go and resettle. They would repopulate. They would make use of the land they conquer. You go to these villages, and they stay a post-apocalyptic hellscape. This is about killing people, and it's all about killing people.
You've been on the ground. You've been on the ground. Have you interviewed any of these people you are accusing? The Fulani herdsmen, the Boko Haram, the ISWAP, the Al-Qaeda people. Have you spoken to any of them?
Online. In fact, Sheikh Gummy has called me out online just yesterday. He is the imam of the radicals. In fact, he was recently tried to go to Saudi Arabia, and they immediately deported him because he's too radical. An imam that's too radical to enter Saudi Arabia. Okay, so that guy, yeah, he's called me out online. We've exchanged posts, but so let me just tell you a quick story. One of the IDP camps where we have a school in Abuja, where we serve at that school close to 400 students, and I can show you dozens. We've recorded testimonials from dozens of them, including young people who. A young man when he was 6 years old had to drink water with blood in it because they kept dumping bodies in their well. They were from a community called Ngoshe that's in Gwoza, LGA in Borno State, in the mountainous area northeast Borno. We sent a couple of these displaced people back to go see their homes with our team and with a videographer. They went back, and this was just last fall. This was last September. I went back to Ngoshe. Very difficult trip. They had to go to Maiduguri and go on a military convoy with machine gun trucks. They had to stop and defuse a roadside bomb on the way. And they made it to Ngoshe. And the community that's left is in a military cordoned area with guard towers. It's a military protected area. They live worse than they live at the IDP camps. It's horrible. And they couldn't go visit their old homes. They could see them, but they weren't allowed to travel there. But it's all destroyed. It's all a hellscape. In this military area, a little while back, the military chaplain there felt called to build a little church, which was very courageous. And he said, we didn't know what was going to happen when we started playing music. They didn't know if they were going to be attacked. But he said when they started playing music, people started running from the hills to come worship with them. It's called More Than Conquerors Church. I correspond with the pastor on WhatsApp. And we met these people. After our team left, it wasn't long after that, the pastor sent us a video, a Boko Haram video. I can send it to you. Members of this church, More Than Conquerors Church, and this was last fall, that went out from this military cordoned area to go get food, and they were captured. And there was a couple dozen of them. All the women and girls were sold into sex slavery, and all the men had their heads cut off with dull axes as the gathered crowd cheered. Okay, that was not that long ago. That was just about a year ago. That's the state of existence today. And yes, that's as close as you can get to interviewing these people if you're a white man. But yeah, that is those were people that we had met and talked to. They're members of our church, and I know their pastor. So, I mean, that's just the reality. That is what it is.
Yeah, so I hear this part of the story you're telling me. In the press conference you mentioned a few minutes ago in Abuja, you sat there with Reno, and you people kind of had a spar, an ideological spar on key definitions. Why do you think that Reno would have a completely different view from what you are telling me here? Is it because he's not been to the ground, or is it because he's doing a spin, as you said?
He's a soulless snake. The reason I connected with him was because he was an outspoken voice. And you can go on his Twitter feed and just search for Christian genocide. And in 2023, he was screaming about the Nigerian Christian genocide and trying to call attention to it because that was in his political favor. Now there's a new president who's paying his bills, and he flips and calls it a hoax. He never recanted what he said. Whatever way the wind blows and puts money in his pocket is what he will say. He is a soulless spin doctor. And I know him personally. I can tell you that he was.
I didn't want to make this about. I didn't want to make this about Reno. What I wanted to bring across
I answered your question. He's a pathological liar, and he's been paid to spin it away. That's why.
Those are accusations that would generally be here. I would generally like to have those if he were here to talk about it and to respond to that. But since he's not here,
I can prove everything.
Since he's not here, let's not talk much about that. But what I know is that people can change their viewpoints when issues change, when they have more facts and more evidence. Why do you think that to change your mind you must only be on the payroll of the government?
I didn't say to change your mind you have to be on the payroll of the government. You asked me about Randall Mokri, and that's exactly the situation with him. Let me just give you an example. He actually visited me in my hometown of Blanco. Okay, I know the guy. I know him well. I had a friend of mine who owns multiple classic vehicles take us on a ride in an old 1923 Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost and 1936 Bentley. And this is the owner of these is a friend of mine. Reno went away from there and posted himself with videos of these cars, claiming them as his own and telling people how much he paid for them and how rich he is because he owns these cars. That man is a pathological liar. It is what it is.
Let's keep Reno. We can talk about him.
I can show you the clips. I can show you the titles of those vehicles and prove to you that he's a liar.
We can talk about Reno if he's here on those terms. We can talk about him on those terms if he's here. I just wanted to get a general sense of what Nigerian policymakers are talking about.
His own words. You can go search his own posts and you'll see it.
Yeah, let's switch gears and let's talk about. I know you mentioned Usman Danfodio, but before talking about Usman Danfodio, even what is going to be your last or your ultimate solution? President Trump already said he's preparing a Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, to go into Nigeria. Is that what you want to see?
I'm calling for 4 things, and the way I would uproot this. First is a congressional delegation, and this is from the United States side, to take cameras into these camps, to the IDP camps, take them to the mass graves, talk to the whistleblowers, get the testimonies. That's what flipped the script in Bosnia. And look, everywhere there's atrocities, there's always denial. You know, it is what it is. But to go and meet these people, to document their stories, to validate, or refute, whatever, but to get to the bottom of it, to go to these camps, to meet these people, first, shine the light. That's first step. Second, I call for the indictment of the Tinubu administration for genocide, for their intentional denial of aid, mistreatment of the displaced. And we can get into the facts. I know that they lie about them. They call them criminals, beggars, and thieves. I have it on hidden camera. I've been documenting this for 6 years. I don't speak. I don't shoot from the hip. I'm talking from, and everything I say I can validate 100%. This administration stands guilty of genocide for their denial of aid and their mistreatment of the displaced. Third, the investigation and likely designation of the Sokoto Caliphate as an international terror organization. Those 2 things will give the United States government and the world the tools they need and the leeway they need to truly address this. The indictment of the administration and the designation of the caliphate. And then finally, number 4, focused on restoring the displaced generation. Open Doors, a very, very credible human rights organization, says statistically 50 to 60% of displaced become radicalized. There are as many as 11 to 12 million displaced Nigerians. Numbers bear out that by 2030, within 5 years, we will see 5 to 6 million more radicalized Nigerians with we didn't even talk about the looting of the resources, the billions a year of minerals that are extracted from the north that fund all of this. Imagine 5 or 6 million more radicalized jihadis with billions of dollars in mineral resources at their disposal. This is a vital national interest, not only for the United States, but for the world. Their stated goal is to bring Sharia law to all of Nigeria and use it as a base of jihad to conquer the world. That might be a delusional pipe dream, but that's their motivation and that's their goal.
How did you arrive at this conclusion? It's quite severe.
Which conclusion?
That they want to get the Sokoto Caliphate and use it as a base to capture the rest of the world through and radicalize or Islamize the rest of the world.
Well, Marshall, let me address real quick the blood minerals. I was in Goodluck Jonathan's living room in May of last year in Abuja when we were discussing this, when he leaned in and said, look at the minerals, that's what's funding this, the blood minerals. And their own government says that, and when their own government says it, it's probably 10 times more, but that about $9 billion a year of tin, gold, lithium, and rare earth elements are looted from the north. And that funds this. That is, their own government admits that. I mean, that you can look that up yourself. If you look at the founding of the government, Bello said, it was in the 60s, that their goal was to dip the Quran in the Atlantic Ocean. That means, like in the Middle East, it would be from the river to the sea. Their mantra, their manifest destiny is to dip their Quran in the Atlantic Ocean. President Buhari, you can look up his comments. It's published, where he called for Sharia law in Nigeria at any cost, and he called for global Sharia law. That was the ideology of Muhammadu Buhari, the prior president, who Tinubu helped get in office. And if you look at that, in fact, the video that I mentioned that was of these people that we know that had their heads cut off with dull axes as a recruitment video, it starts with the U.S. flag being pulled down, the British flag being pulled down, the French flag being pulled down, and the black flag of jihad being raised. This was not a global jihad until the current Sultan of Sokoto brought in ISIS and Al-Qaeda and globalized it. The current Sultan of Sokoto, who took the throne in 2006, before that, was a brigadier general attaché assigned to Pakistan and Afghanistan during the war. At the same time he was there as the general from Nigeria, U.S. forces were capturing Taliban and Al-Qaeda forces with Nigerian fighters embedded with them. The Nigerian fighters there were fighting for Taliban and Al-Qaeda, while the general there came back home to be the Sultan of Sokoto, 19th generation descendant of Usman Dan Fodio. And when he came back, concurrent with that, is when the local jihad started using international tactics. They started using IEDs. They started using suicide bombs. They started the sophisticated kidnapping and all that. That came back at the same time that the Sultan came back. And then ISIS, we all know ISIS. It is now headquartered there. It's ISWAP, Islamic State West African Province. Al-Qaeda there has affiliates now. They're all operating there with impunity. And that's what's globalized this, is the circumstantial evidence, which is pretty overwhelming, points directly to the Sultan of Sokoto is the one who did that. There could be another explanation. He's either guilty or he's the weakest Muslim leader in the history of the world and can't do anything about it because he's never issued a fatwa against it. He's never spoken against it. He's never tried to stop the looting of blood minerals. He's never done anything to condemn this mass killing. Again, he's the Pope and King of 108 million Muslims. So he's either 100% complicit or he's completely powerless and emasculated. And I don't think he would agree that he's powerless and emasculated.
Anyway, we can organize a separate conversation on that one, on the Sultan's role. But let's go back to the 4 points you mentioned about your solutions to this. You mentioned a congressional delegation to go and video themselves and get the testimonies, the indictment of Tinubu's government for terrorism.
For genocide.
And genocide.
For genocide.
Yeah. and investigation and designation of the Sokoto Caliphate as a terrorist organization, and then to restore the displaced generation because they are likely to become radicalized due to their displacement. President Trump has rather decided to set a task force to discuss with the government of Nigeria. And we recently saw the Nigerian government replace the Minister of Defense. Was that at the behest of President Trump?
First, is the guy going to have any real influence, or are his wings clipped, and is this just a PR stunt? That remains to be seen. I tend to be, if you look at what the Nigerian government has done since Trump's called attention to this, I was a part of their effort. It's been to cover up the truth and to spin and distract and not to actually address the issues. If you look at what Yusuf Tuggar, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, I know the man. I can WhatsApp him right now. I corresponded. I met him in person. I delivered a Texas Cowboy hat to him last time I was there. I know Yusuf Tuggar. For him to go on international media and say that there's only 177 people that's been killed, that's not only blithering, it's either complete blithering incompetence or it's an intentional lie, and he's not incompetent. They're trying to hide it and cover it up. They're not trying to address it. They're not trying to find the truth. They know the truth. They're trying to hide the truth.
So from your analysis, President Trump's approach is not going to yield any fruit. Is that what you're saying?
I don't know what Trump's approach is. So far, he's tweeted twice. That's been Trump's approach, and it's certainly shaken things up. Trump doesn't mess around. Trump has ended 8 wars, and he brought peace to the Middle East. In fact, before all this happened, I had said the only thing left for him to do is to end the Christian genocide. And sure enough, that's what he's doing, I think. I don't believe sanctions are going to help one bit. I don't think bureaucratic maneuvers are going to help one bit. If the U.S. government shuts down all their bank accounts and ends trade, they're just going to pivot to China. And China will eagerly lap it up. They're going to, the sanction, this isn't ideologically driven ultimately, and it's driven by corruption. And the U.S. shutting them off is not going to end it. No.
So with these 4 points you've mentioned, how are these 4 points going to stop the Christian genocide in Nigeria?
Well, the first, it's going to give tools to the international community to do what's necessary. I believe Predator drones and Tomahawk missiles go a lot further than stopping visas and shutting down bank accounts. I believe this is going to take direct action from the world to end this. Look, at the heart of this, and this is everywhere, Nigeria is not unique. It's just uniquely big. It's the biggest cookie jar, and all these global forces have their bloody hand caught in this cookie jar. But this same template of jihad and mineral looting and corruption happens elsewhere. It's just Nigeria is the biggest and most important place where it's happening now. But at the heart of it all is an ideology that it's okay, in fact, it's glorious to kill somebody who doesn't believe like you do. The acceptance, the tolerance of that thought that my neighbor is a Democrat, I'm a Republican, so I'm going to go kill that person and God will reward me for it. That's pure evil. And that's what's taken root there. That's what's at the foundation of the Nigerian government is the tolerance of that. And the consideration of that is just another idea, another power base. That needs to be rooted out around the world. That needs to stop everywhere it exists.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how these 4 points are going to bring a solution to this problem. Because, for example, you say they're going to give the world, the international community, tools to use. And those tools, from what I'm seeing here, is the indictment of the Buhari government for genocide and terrorism. Then the designation of the Sokoto Caliphate as a terrorist organization.
Well, let me.
These two.
Look at what's Trump doing with the drug cartels right now. He has shut down the importation of fentanyl and other hard drugs in the United States. Unprecedented results because he designated them an international terror group. The designation alone does nothing. What that does is allow him to go in, and now he's blowing up their shipments. He's using the military to stop the importation.
He's blowing up those shipments in international waters. But the Sokoto Caliphate is located within Nigeria.
Well, the nuclear facility was located within Iran. Trump stopped that war by wiping it out. Okay, look, people need to understand, and maybe you need to understand this. Historically speaking, this is like it's 1940, And somebody just discovered Auschwitz. Okay. This is a genocidal regime that has an ambition towards world conquest. And whatever it takes, we need to do it to stop it. Those 4 points will enable, well, the first three. The first one triggers it, the Codel and the revelation of the truth, the indictment and prosecution of the regime there for genocide. That will change things. The Nigerian people, and like most African nations, are good people and could rise. There's never been a place on earth that's been
let's
more
let's
abused.
let's talk about that in a moment. You just indicted the International Criminal Court for being biased with the
Yep,
UN for being
absolutely.
biased. I did not react to that, but now you are still calling on those same organizations to indict and try the Tinubu government for genocide and terrorism. Are you not being contradictory?
No, you got to start somewhere. And I think with the right amount of international pressure, the U.S. has the clout to make sure things are done right. Ultimately, if we choose to use it, and Trump is very good at that, the U.S. could shut off funding to the United Nations. We prop up the entire organization. If they get too far out of line, you just I mean, they need to be brought to adherence to their principles and not the corruption. We need to the corruption will hurt anything. Corruption
So
will hurt.
you are in
No, those are
in
the tools we
effect
have.
you are telling me that
Those are the
President
tools we have.
Trump in effect, you're telling me that President Trump is the president of the world, so he can get into Nigeria and do what he did in Iran to this same caliphate.
Somebody needs to stop it. If we leave it to politics, if we leave it to politicians, if we leave it to those who are subject to corruption and have agendas beyond doing the right thing, look where it's got us. Trump is a singular leader. And look, I was not a fan of Trump when he first ran for president. In fact, I was actively against him when he ran for president in 2016. I actively opposed him. But he has earned my respect. He's ended 8 wars and he's brought peace to the Middle East. That's indisputable. And he's a singular global leader. If there was another way, it should be done as an international coalition. It should be done by the Nigerian people themselves. And if you got the stranglehold off of them, they would do it themselves. As you know, Africa has been dumped on, looted, extracted, raped, killed for centuries, more than any other place on earth. It's been subjugated and it's been divided, it's been extracted from. I'm an advocate of Nigeria, of Africa. I believe Africa can arise as a preeminent place on earth. I believe what man has long called the dark continent, that God intends to raise up to be the continent of light in our generation. I believe that. I believe Nigeria can be a great nation. The people there are great, but somebody has to end the stranglehold of the corrupt international forces and the corrupt politicians. And if that's done, I believe the Nigerians themselves will build a nation that will be a shining city on a hill. I believe that. It's not about international control, but it's about using the tools that are available today in reality to accomplish what needs to be done.
So why do you think the United States government cannot work with the Nigerian government to resolve this? Why do you think it should be a top-down approach?
Neville Chamberlain tried that in 1980s with Germany, and look where it got him. This is the same thing. These people have no desire to end this. They have no desire to have international scrutiny. They have no desire to stop the corruption. They exist on corruption. That's what feeds them. That's what buys them their estates in the United States and in England. That's what puts the money in their bank. They are corrupt to the core. They don't care about the people there. Sending arms and assistance to the Nigerian government to stop this would be like sending arms and assistance to the Third Reich to stop the Holocaust. That's going to be the same end result. We need to see that. The world needs to see it for what it is.
Sending assistance with some checks and balances can actually give Nigeria the lead and the United States the support to ensure that the assistance goes where it's supposed to go. Because at some point, we need to recognize the sovereignty of other nations and uphold them.
That's a very naive view, and no offense, but it's like feeding the wolf more so he'll do a better job of guarding the sheep. Working with the fox to guard the hens. It's a non-starter. Again, I believe 100% in the sovereignty of the Nigerian people. And how that looks when this is all said and done is up to them, whether they retain the boundaries that the British forced on them or not. That's up to them. but they need help. I don't believe in having artificial systems in my body. I don't like using medicine if I don't have to, but sometimes you need surgery. Sometimes you need to be hooked up to life support. Sometimes you need medicine so you can get healthy, so you can be sovereign, so you can be independent and healthy. They need surgery, and that can't happen from within because those that hold the scalpel are corrupt.
At that point, where will Donald Trump and the US president or the US government stop? Because all countries in this world have their own problems, and they believe that some people in those countries believe that we need to get that surgery to get this resolved. If the US president needs to go into every other country in the world, where would that land the United States taxpayer?
And it's not every other country in the world. And if you look at Trump's track record, he's ended U.S. entanglement in these ongoing wars that previous administrations had us tied into. He doesn't want to have boots on the ground. He doesn't want to meddle in other people's affairs, but he wants peace. He wants security. He wants shared prosperity. That's why I say I believe he's the man for the job. I think if we wait and another president or politician gets in there, it'll be a dangerous thing because maybe they would want to make it another Vietnam or another Afghanistan. And that's a horrible mistake. Trump is a unique historic figure that I believe God has put here for this reason. Where does it stop? I would draw the line at when the IDPs can go home safely. They can't now. They can't now. But when they are able to, there wouldn't be another reason to stick around because getting them home safely requires purging of the jihadis. So that's where I would draw the line.
You just said some of the jihadis coming from neighboring countries. So what is it going to do if they stop those who are there right now? Does it stop those with the views in neighboring countries, maybe, I don't know, in Niger, Mali, Cameroon, Chad, from coming in and continue from where the current ones ended?
So border security, I think, is very important. We're seeing that here. You're seeing it in Europe. The number one name for boys born in England late these days, and it's been a while, is Mohammed. It's forever changed. Not that's in and of itself a bad thing, but it's changing the fundamental character of the nation because of the lax border security. I think people should go back to their nation of origin, and then we help them become prosperous where they belong.
But the Fulani, for example, would say they are present in Nigeria, Cameroon, Chad, Niger, Burkina Faso, Ghana, Togo. So they want to form their own country. Would that not lead to the separation of African countries as they are, which could create a bigger problem for the African continent?
That's a good question. I tend to think that the British did not help anybody, and they weren't trying to help anybody by the way they drew a lot of these borders. The Europeans who drew the current borders didn't do it for the benefit of the residents there. They did it for their own benefit. I think you know that. And so, yeah, I think there needs to be some shifting of that. It's not up to me to say who or where or how. I think diverse people can live together in peace, and I think it's a good thing when they do. But if there's a people group that refuses to live together at peace with others, then yeah, put them on their own. Let them destroy their own domain. Keep them out of my land. But so those are bigger questions than you and I are going to solve.
Absolutely, because the solutions you are proposing are also the trigger to the cause of other problems. Because when you listen to most of the Nigerians who are supporting the Tinubu government since this conversation about the Christian genocide started, most of them say Nigeria is one and indivisible, and they don't want to see it separated. So your proposals can push them to say, okay, since the Christians have brought in the Americans to protect them, let us carve out our Fulani and our Christian part of the country and go away. And they are claiming that the problem is us. So let's go away and leave them in peace.
First of all, it's not the Christians bringing in the United States. As I said, it should be human beings that have decency.
That is the argument that those you are accusing are going to say, because you are framing it as a Christian genocide.
And what I've personally seen, and not necessarily scientific, but the dissent that I've seen. So, for example, when I left Nigeria after that press conference, I had 114 followers on Twitter and about 900 on Facebook. I have, I think, pushing 80,000 Facebook now and Twitter. And Twitter is a pretty good mishmash. You attract all kinds. A deep analysis shows that Of those who are speaking against U.S. involvement, 85% are manufactured accounts. They're phony accounts. 85% of those speaking against it online are phony. There's not too many Nigerians I've talked to at all across the board who are against intervention to fix this so they can get on their own feet. I don't think you're.
Is that not an easy pushover to escape responsibility by saying that those who are saying all this are bots? Who did that study to determine that these are bots talking on Twitter?
You can do the analysis yourself.
You made the allegation, so
yeah, you can do so.
Let us know.
AI analysis. You can do Grok. It sits on top of Twitter. Grok sits on top of X, and that's its knowledge base. And you can ask it to run a very detailed analysis, and it's extremely detailed and scientific. And it'll analyze these accounts, and you can look at the account and see, for example, and you can go in and click on anyone that's saying something negative. 85% of them are going to be clearly, the account set up in 2019 has 7 followers, and everything that's ever done is a repost. That is a phony account, and most of them resemble that. I mean, it is what it is.
Are you sure there are no other accounts of that nature that are saying things in support of what you're advocating for? Also?
I haven't seen it, and I haven't seen the paid shills going out there to do spin on the positive side. For example, this rally I went to, I was the keynote speaker on Monday. It was people out of pocket. These are everyday people who dug deep to help pay for this rally. This wasn't a astroturf. This wasn't fake grassroots. These are very real people. And again, I've been boots on the ground for 16 trips over there since 2010. I am now, you can look it up, I'm the most famous and the most trusted American in Nigeria. I have a fairly good connection with the people there. When I tweet something today, it becomes a headline there tomorrow. Literally. You can research that yourself. I guarantee you I'm in multiple newspapers today with what I said yesterday. I have a pretty good handle on this. Again, I'm not just saying what I've read or seen online. I'm saying what I've experienced and what I've lived. This is firsthand that I'm telling you. I can back up everything I'm telling you. I don't shoot from the hip.
Thank you.
I'll tell you.
I do agree that you don't shoot from the hip, and you've been there many times and you have the data you have, but we always want to have assertions and allegations clarified, not for my benefit, but for the benefit of those who are watching us, because we want our viewers to go home with verifiable information. And we cannot fact check everything you're saying here right now. So we encourage the viewers to also fact check and leave comments in the comments section so we know what their thoughts are, because we cannot get a better Africa or a better Nigeria without the viewers contributing.
Amen.
We do believe in what you're saying, but we also want to hear the viewers, hear from them what they think about what you have said, because that advances the conversation and also brings to light what is either hidden or lost or nuanced or forgotten during the course of the conversation.
I deeply appreciate your approach. And I, this is probably in the last 3 weeks, probably done 35, 40 podcasts. I did Laura Ingraham on Fox News. I've done some pretty big ones. And you are definitely very rigorous, very thoughtful, very thorough, and I appreciate that greatly. What I've said from the beginning, there's no such thing as darkness, and there's a great darkness over the land, but darkness literally doesn't exist. Darkness is the absence of light. Darkness is not a thing. It's the absence of something. It's the absence of light. And the only way to solve this ultimately is to shine the light. It's for the truth to be unearthed and to be revealed and to be known. And that's all of my points, all of my ideas, all of my suggestions go back to ultimately is founded on that. The truth must prevail because it's the truth that sets us free. And you're obviously a truth seeker, and I appreciate that greatly.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for throwing those flowers on us. My team and I, we are very grateful because we always try to do some background research before we have you here. Also, our guests should feel very comfortable because we go back to get information to ensure that whatever the guest is saying here is of value, because we want to bring value. We want to advance the conversation across the continent, because we cannot change lives on the continent if we don't verify the information we are sharing with our viewers. So thank you so much for that positive commendation.
This has been fun. You're sporty. I like that.
Let's get one more issue and then I let you go. And that is the rally that was held in DC, organized by the Safe Nigeria group. You were the keynote speaker.
Yes.
Definitely you were the keynote speaker because you have been to Nigeria and they know you. But why would they choose you amongst all the other Nigerians who understand the issues, or all the other Americans who understand the issues?
Many people recognize me as the most authoritative American on this subject, even up to very high levels in Washington that recognize the fact that I have not only been there more, but also the way my mind works and the connections I have. Again, I know Yusuf Tuggar, I know Muhammad Idris Malagi, I know Reno Omokri, I know Nuhu Rabadu, I know these people. Okay, I know the Senator Akpabio, the Senate President. I know Goodluck Jonathan. I served on a board with General Yakubu Gowon. I prayed with Cardinal Oniyakin in his private chapel on more than one occasion. I know these people. God has given me great favor, great access, but also down to the lowest level with these IDPs and survivors that are my dear friends and brothers and sisters. God has put me in this position for a reason, and I'm committed to walking in it. And I think they recognize that. Again, I am the most recognized American in Nigeria, and I'm the most trusted American in Nigeria. That's why they reached out to me. And that's not me. I'm not feathering my nest or tooting my horn. I look forward to this being over and going back and being a nobody in the countryside of Texas. I haven't sought this. I'll probably get rid of my social media accounts when it's all done. I'm not out to gain anything from this, but God has put me in this position, and they recognize that. That's why they invited me.
All right. During the rally, what came across as the main message? Do the Nigerians themselves who were present at the rally, are they looking forward to having President Trump do what he's doing very fast? Or are they hoping that the Nigerian government should fix things so that the United States doesn't get involved?
No. So, well, you realize it was not a scientific sample of Nigerians because they're diaspora Nigerians. But there were a lot of folks there, though, that like Frank Utu, if you know him. Frank Uto, he's from Ilatwa. You should interview him. He's an attorney from Nigeria who's now in the United States to get his master's degree. In Yalatwa, just in June, he had 39 of his family members killed in one night. There was 270 some odd in his village, and he was on the phone while it was happening, talking to them that were murdered in one night. He's extremely well versed, great guy, and like I said, he's an attorney. He's a very rigorous person. He would be a great conversationalist and a source, and he is the blood on his boots eyewitness that you might want. I'll be happy to connect you, but. You want an applause line with a Nigerian crowd, tell them Trump's coming, and they will cheer. All the feedback I get continually is, when is he coming? Tell him to hurry up. It is what it is. That's what I
That
hear.
shows a degree of despondence in Nigerians, because why would they suddenly, or why would they expect Trump to come like the savior? Have they given up all the hope they have in their government?
No, because they never had any hope in their government. Their government is a corruptocracy that's always been that way. Their borders were drawn by the British for extraction. They were established to keep the country down. The system is set up to diminish the country so it'll never rise, so it'll always fail, so the outsiders can keep extracting, and they see that clearly. I didn't make that up. I'm not the one that came up with that revelation. I just listened to people and research. But no, there's no hope among any Nigerian that I've ever talked to, other than those that are complete. If you hold the ideology that it's a good thing to kill somebody you disagree with, then you'll support this government. Anybody that doesn't hold that ideology has no hope in this government. And they shouldn't.
In 2027, Nigeria will be organizing presidential elections. Do this crop of Nigerians you talk with, or those who are in DC recently, do they hope that the elections could change the government and subsequently change the policy and the orientation that the government is taking?
No. First, do they even expect that there'll be a free and fair election? No. Has there ever been? Probably not. And they get active because that's the only outlet they have. But no, I don't think anybody holds any hope that the Nigerian government, the Nigerian system will ever be. Because when 2010, that era, when Goodluck Jonathan, he's sort of the Forrest Gump of Nigerian politics. He didn't have the ambition that took him to the presidency. His sort of fate got him there. But at the time, it was the only nation on earth where radical Islam was being pushed back. And there were good things happening. It wasn't all universally good. He made some mistakes. But the other side said if he wins, that this place will be so bloody that, it's not going to stand. They won't let a true reformer get in. It will be the other side. The North will cause bloody genocidal civil war if somebody too strong on the other side gets in power. That's just the reality. That's been the history there, and that's what they say they're going to do. It's their own words, is you don't want to get too uppity or we're going to knock you down. So no, there's no hope, and there shouldn't be hope. It'd be a fool's errand to believe that this government, the way it's structured, will ever be able to fix this problem.
So what I'm hearing from them is they have lost all hope in their own country.
In the government?
Yeah, if the government cannot guarantee the protection of citizens and property.
Yeah, no, that's what I hear, and that's, I don't think it would be wise to think anything else.
But when they say Trump should come in right now, and they recognize the fact that Trump cannot come in right now, what are they looking as intermediary steps to get things better for them?
A lot of them call for a referendum for separation. That's a lot of them. That's their only hope. They believe that if they can split off the South and have a prosperous Christian nation, that they'll solve all their problems. I think that's foolish, because then they'll have a neighbor that's going to always be at war with them and trying to kill them. You need to win the peace before you can make those kind of decisions. They want Trump to come now, and if he's not coming now, they want a referendum so they can leave the amalgamated nation of Nigeria.
So is that referendum for the independence of the Southeast, or of the Southwest, or the Southeast and Southwest combined?
It's I don't know, that you'll get different answers if you ask different people. What do you do with the Middle Belt? Do they join us? That's not my position, so I'm not going to say what I think, but because I don't. But they just believe that if you can take the 12 Caliphate, Sharia law states, and make them their own thing and keep them away from us, is basically seems to be the idea. Some of them want it to be a smaller, tighter enclave in the in the Igbo or that area. Some of them want to reach out and have draw the line somewhere else. I don't know where the line would be drawn in such a thing. But again, if Trump's not coming today, they want a referendum tomorrow. That's the predominant that I hear.
That is a difficult thing to see. From when you talk with the policymakers in DC, the White House, State Department, and Congress, do you hear from them that Trump is going to come today or tomorrow?
No. I haven't talked to anybody at the White House. I did talk to folks in the offices that Trump has assigned to look into this. And there's a lot of more research and work and policy considerations, analysis, etc. In fact, I just got off the phone before this call with a group put together by Senator Sam Brownback. He was the former ambassador at large for international religious freedom under Trump's first administration. And I'm not going to go into the details of it, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done before I believe Trump is going to do something decisive. There's still a lot of unclear, a lot of misinformation, a lot of hidden information that needs to be brought to the surface before
throughout this conversation, you gave me the impression that a lot of work has already been done and all the data is already available. And I thought that data could just be put in front of President Trump now for an executive order.
It's I wish that could be the case, and but again, when you have conflicting narratives and you have conflicting agendas and you have conflicting ideologies, I don't know Trump. I don't know how his brain works, but at least that the people I'm dealing with, they still have a lot of questions. And that's why I call for a congressional delegation. And even I said, I don't know nobody knows how many IDPs there are. Nobody knows. Nobody knows where all the IDP concentration camps are because it's been denied. It's been hidden. I can say one of the policy points I've been pushing is a independent international undertaking to do a census of the displaced in Nigeria. I think that would be crucial, and that would unravel everything if they were able to do that.
From our conversation, are you sure you would be satisfied with the outcome of the International Census Committee? Because you don't seem to trust the international.
That's the first step. That's the first step. It has to be done right. Corruption will touch anything, but if there is an honest census and it's done and it's enforced and it's transparent and it's truth, I believe that truth will set in motion everything that needs to happen. That truth is what will convict this government of genocide. That truth is what will designate the Caliphate as a terror organization, because you have millions of eyewitnesses that will testify. So yeah, you got to start somewhere, and especially when people are sitting on the fence, when they don't know, when they're not going to jump to a designation. They're not going to jump to an indictment. You got to build it up. And yes, the next step, I would be very happy if the next step was a aggressive, accurate, monitored census of the displaced. That would set the ball rolling, I think, to fix everything. It wouldn't fix everything, but it would set the ball rolling.
That sounds like it's going to take around 10 more years for this to be, for the president of the United States to make a decision.
No. He doesn't wait that long. And there's a lot of gears turning, a lot of people very motivated by this, but we're not there yet. What is his tipping point? I don't know. I don't know the guy, but he's decisive and he's in a hurry because he doesn't have 10 more years.
So what motivates someone who is working on this designated by President Trump to ensure that this thing goes very fast? Normally, the person working on it does not have any interest. He's not a Nigerian. He's not been to Nigeria like you. He doesn't have a Nigerian friend. He doesn't have a Nigerian brother. He is simply working for President Trump. What is going to motivate him to get that thing out of the door like now?
Well, there's first of all, Trump saying to. Second is the reality of politics. They know that, in a couple of years, we might have a different president that is in favor of genocide, like Obama was. I'm saying that flippantly. But also the people I've been dealing with, from the State Department to the congressional offices, it's that human thing. This is an injustice. This is horrific. This needs to stop. But also the national security side, that this is a ticking time bomb. If every day there are more and more radicalized, displaced people, that for our national interest and for the security of the world, that this must be addressed and it has to be done soon. We've ignored it for far too long. So what would motivate them to work fast? Talked about. First of all, Trump has told them to do it fast. Second, they know that he has only a window of a few more years that he can possibly get anything done. And finally, they're motivated for the right reasons. A is the human side of it, that this atrocity must stop. But B, it's the understanding of the international security and national security that is at risk because of all this. Yeah, they're good people and they want to see the right thing done.
Fantastic. Mike, thank you so much for coming to the Beyond Africa podcast. What last word do you have for our viewers?
Darkness is just the absence of light. Be the light. Be the future you want to see. The way we fight this isn't using the tactics of the other side. This is not about vengeance. This is not about hate. This is not about purging people who think differently. This is about creating a righteous, free, equitable world. And act that way. Be the future you want to see, and you will see it.
Thank you so much, Mike. Thank you for coming to the Beyond Africa podcast. Dear viewers, thank you so much for watching us. This is a period where we are going to have a dense and deep dive into the Nigerian political landscape, because security is of critical importance. The Boko Haram threat cuts across West Africa, and Africans are supposed to pay attention to what is happening in Nigeria. It started in Nigeria and it spread across to other countries, and the risk that it may spread across other countries is still very high. However, with the current stakes and decisions by President Trump, it's important that we watch and see what is happening. In the meantime, let us also focus on what is happening in Nigeria and other countries like Cameroon, where governments must and should protect citizens and their property. For the Beyond Africa podcast, I have been your host, Ngalim Bernard. Please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment. What a time to be alive. What a time to follow African politics. See you in our next episode.